Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm delighted to be joined by Dan White, who's going to be presenting on soft skills, the key difference to becoming highly effective and valued. So the moment I'll pass over to Dan, he'll be able to begin the session. But before I do, I'd just like to let everyone know that today's session is being recorded and you'll receive a copy of the recording a week from today. Today's session will also involve a few polls, and obviously these will pop up on your screen when we reach the polls, and it'll give you a chance to obviously answer the questions which we have to Dan's webinar. Lastly, the remaining 10 minutes will be used for Q&A. So if you do have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to type these in either to the chat or the Q&A function, and we'll put them forward to Dan at this time. So lastly, without any further ado, I'll pass over to Dan to start the session. So over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Paul. Hello, everyone, and thank you to Paul for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to everyone today. My name is Dan White. I look a bit like the drawing that should be on your screen now. And if you're a fan of Professor Byron Sharp, you'll appreciate me putting my distinctive brand assets there for you all to see and to help you remember the presentation and me afterwards. That's the goal of that. So I will do 30 seconds about myself. I spent 30 years in corporate life, mainly within companies Millwall Brown, Kantar and WPP. And after 30 years in corporate life, I've spent 3 years as an independent consultant. I started my career as a market researcher, and I was heavily involved in the innovation of new market research products and measurement products, such as Brand Z. Many of you will have heard of the Brand Z brand equity system that's used to value brands each year. I also then evolved into a marketeer and became a CMO eventually. But increasingly, I spent my time I don't know all the phrases, but the best I can come up with is a concept visualizer. In other words, trying to capture sometimes hopefully quite sophisticated ideas in super clear and succinct ways, particularly marketing business frameworks, as well as some of the soft skills that you'll be seeing today. I also spend my time as a writer and a speaker and a coach trainer as well. So that's me. What about this session? Well, as the title suggests, it's all about soft skills. So I think it's worth defining what I mean by soft skills before we get cracking. I find it quite useful to think of all the skills that you need to develop to succeed in business can be categorized into two buckets. I mean, firstly, there's the technical skills, and these relate to the specific job function and field that you work in. So, for example, you'll need to learn certain technical skills if you work within HR or that are different from finance and different from marketing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And those are your technical skills, and also you'll build up technical skills within a sector. But then there are all the other skills that you'll need to be successful as well. And these are kind of much broader, and they're the ones that apply to many, many different jobs and are highly transferable, when you want to get a job in a slightly different field from where you are at the moment. And what I'm really talking about here is collaboration, communication skills, the ability to lead people, and the skills required to work efficiently and effectively. So that's what my book is all about. In fact, not just one book, 2 books. When I left corporate life, I finally got round to compiling the 2 books that I'd had in my head for the last 10 or so years. But actually, the research I did into these books effectively goes back 30 years. Right through my career, from day one, I was obsessed by taking notes and scribbles, and I used to do it, and I still do it actually, in A5, sort of the classic A5 notebooks, and always with a pencil as well for some reason. And it would be anything I'd learned that I thought might be useful for me later. So if I went on a training course and there was a really useful framework, I'd jot it down. Or I'd do doodles that I found helpful to get my head around a particular topic, either a specific topic around market research or marketing or business, or anything else that goes into the sort of soft skills group. And finally, I managed to dust off, I think it was 50 different A5 notebooks, make sure the drawings looked presentable, redrew them, and put all the words around them to capture every single thing I'd learned for 30 years, which is quite cathartic, really. But also, it's proven popular and helpful to other people. So that's the background to the books. What about this session? Okay, we're going to be focusing on just 6 out of the 50 topics covered in the soft skills book. And here they are now. So it's about working with other people, choosing your managerial approach, how to lead teams, run meetings, build your network, and tell business stories. So this is like a taster of some of the kind of areas that I think are most particularly valuable. And some of my very favorite frameworks are in here as well. So let's get cracking. First one, working with other people. So I think in order to collaborate effectively, the first thing that you need to do is just to recognize and acknowledge that different people have different types of personalities and like working in different ways. Just acknowledging that is a good head start. And that helps you to recognize those differences and, where necessary, where appropriate, to adapt how you engage with people. And there are lots, you'll have come across lots of personality profiling things, I'm sure, over your life, actually. But I find this one, I'm particularly proud of the way I've put it together, actually. And there are several ones similar to this. Because I think the simpler the better, because they can be more easily applied. And so if you, broadly, there are these sort of tendencies. One, let's start at the top, getting it right. I'm just going to crib from my own book, actually, to remember. Yeah, so you can tell people who like to get it right because they have a focus on, they're very measured. They tend to be quite logical and precise and often succinct and like facts and figures. There are also some behavioral traits of people who tend to be like this, tend to be a little bit less tactile, not always, but sometimes less likely to maintain eye contact, things like that. So you've got that sort of trait. Then you've got the trait on the right, and I've tried to just banging, it's a bit aggressive really, but anyway, putting your fist down sort of thing, maybe too aggressive, which is where the focus is on getting it done. That sense of urgency. They tend to be quite authoritative figures, the people who are strong on this trait, more confident, firm handshake, that kind of behavior. Then you have the third one, which is people who love learning new stuff, experimenting with new stuff, innovating. They love, they're very energetic, usually quite charismatic, keen to explore and talk too much. As you can tell already, I lean in that direction very much myself. And then finally, there's getting on well. And this is people who have a strong trait in being welcoming, nurturing, enjoy harmony, are very sociable, etc., and tend to bring people together. So hopefully you'll recognize those 4 traits. And I thought we'd do a quick poll now, where if you could vote on which of these 4 tendencies you personally identify more strongly with. So
okay, Dan, so we've got the poll open. So we'll just give it a few more moments for everyone to answer. But just so the audience knows, we will have Q&A at the end. So please, if you do have any questions throughout this webinar, please type them in. And obviously, we'll put forward the questions to Dan when we reach the Q&A section. So we're pretty much there. So I'll close the poll.
Oh, that was quick. That's good.
Share the results with you. You should see them on your screen now.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I can. Yeah, okay. So, right, getting it right and getting on well are the two slightly bit higher than getting it done and getting somewhere new. Quite a balance, actually. That's good. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense given the profile of people I expect who are on this group. But also, it's a good balance. I have been in businesses and teams where everyone is in the top 1 or 2, and that's not always very effective. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So that's brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Paul. Oh, I should say as well, these aren't like categories. It's not like I'm a getting it right person through and through. People vary depending on circumstances and settings, could evolve a bit over time, and also you can have elements of one and others. Have a preference in one or 2 areas, not just one. But yeah. Now, the reason, obviously this kind of profiling can be very helpful to your own personal development, but I particularly like this framework for using it to help you work well with other people. Now, the very best thing you can do if you want to work well with someone is to get to know them. just ask them questions, find out what their priorities are, find out the ways they like to work. Ask them directly in many cases. And I would always recommend that's the best thing you can do, especially when you first work with somebody. However, it's sometimes useful in business to sort of sense which of these personality traits someone has, particularly like in new business, when you're trying to persuade someone of something, but you don't know them well enough yet, and you haven't had a chance to get to know them. In which case, by using those behavioral traits, and the sense that you get, you can sort of maybe predict what kind of person they are. And even if you don't, and even if later on you do find out, this next grid is extremely useful if you have a sense of other people and what their traits are, because how you handle people should and can vary dramatically depending on their preferences. So, for example, if you want to persuade someone, then if you're trying to talk to a getting it done type personality, you focus on the end results. But if you want to persuade someone who's getting on well, you might persuade them by talking about how great it will feel when the whole team works together to succeed in whatever it is. So a very different angle, even if it's the same thing you need to persuade someone to actually get on with. What's another good example? Yeah, in terms of what you should respect, always for someone who gets it right, often they can be more private people, so respect that. Whereas someone who likes to get somewhere new, you should respect their kind of hunger to express themselves, give them platforms to do that. And look, set objectives, that's just, I could go on and on about this slide because I find it so useful, but for example, give responsibility for, if you want someone who likes getting it right, give them responsibility for accuracy in a project. If it's getting on well, give them a responsibility maybe within the team to help the team development, etc. Anyway, you can look at this at your leisure in recording. Okay, so that's the first section. That's about getting on with people. The next one is about managerial approach. And I think it's true to say that every individual will develop their own personal managerial style, one that works for them personally. However, a good manager will be able to adapt their managerial approach, at least, depending on the circumstances. And I've come up with this grid. I've read a lot about this and tried to distill it again into a framework, which I'm quite happy with, which is, for example, in a scenario, let's go at the bottom row first, where you're working with an experienced individual or individuals, and we're talking about, a low risk project, or there's low risk in the business at the moment or whatever, then that's a good opportunity to give those experienced people a lot of freedom to basically go off and run things themselves, which is lovely for the manager because they don't have to do so much. Always being there when help's required, but giving free rein. However, if something happens, or it's a crisis or an absolutely critical project, then even with an experienced team, it can work best if you say, look, we're all in this together, we're all experienced, let's work as a team and figure this out to solve the crisis, which is very different if you're working with an inexperienced individual or team. Whereas in a crisis, you can't afford for them to get it wrong. They probably don't have the skills yet to do it. It's not worth you taking the risk. What you'll do is be much more, you'll be directive. You'll tell them what to do. So you can see, depending on the experience level and the risk level, you can adapt your style to be a more effective manager and to help your team develop. The other one I wanted to share with you in the sort of managerial area is an approach I've used more than any other ever. I was lucky to learn this early on in my career, and it's foolproof. And the beautiful thing about this is it will apply to almost any circumstance. This coaching approach actually works, even if you don't know anything about the subject matter that you're helping someone with. So I'll just quickly go through that. It's just a process you go through when someone is trying to solve something or has an issue, and you're, for example, their manager, or it doesn't have to be a manager, it can just be a colleague, anything. So you start by saying, helping the person to clarify, what is the goal? What's the end result? What do you need to achieve? Sometimes just sitting down and helping someone have clarity on the goal helps, and everything else just falls into place. Not always, but sometimes. So that is a valuable thing to do as a manager. Then the next one is just a straightforward, okay, well, what's the current reality? how far along, how close to the goal are you? Where are the gaps? Where are the difficult gaps? What's the gap? Because, and again, that helps people really focus, therefore, on what they need to do. And therefore, the next one is kind of like the person will naturally start to think, well, I could do this, or maybe I need to do that, or I could do this instead, or I'm not sure about that. The next part of the process is to ask them, okay, well, what are these different options? Pin them down, write them down even. And again, that's almost what you're doing there, is helping the person to think of how to solve their own problem. And then finally, sometimes there's more than one option to achieve the same thing. You ask the person, well, what will you do? And then you get them to commit. And that act of committing will often reveal whether or not, which is the right option, because if they commit to one and then realize, oh no, that really won't work, it can help them actually finalize what they really should be doing. That is foolproof. I use it all the time, and I would highly recommend you scribble that one down. I really, 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 really would, if you don't know it already, that is. Okay, third section. This is about teams, leading teams. So there's a lot of clear evidence that the most effective teams have these 4 different things in place. So one is goals. Give me a second. Yeah. In other words, every team needs to know why it exists, what it is there, what it needs to contribute if it's part of a wider organization, etc. What its role, what its team's overall role is. Sometimes that's not clear, especially for well-established companies and teams. Secondly, roles. So everyone within the team needs to be really clear about what they're supposed to do and how that relates to other people in the team, and where the handoffs are, etc. And again, if you've got teams with overlapping or ambiguous responsibilities, that's when you start to get problems and conflict. So that's essential to get those clear at any one time. Then the third one are classic kind of team rules. So this is usually processes or practices that people, by joining the team, they agree to work in this particular way. It can be something practical, as they must always fill out their timesheet. It might be a particular way they agree to work, etc. And then the fourth one is values. Now, values is a little bit different because these are more principles, really, rather than hard and fast rules of the way that people in the team are expected to contribute, to behave. So I'll just pick out a few from my book. So, for example, ones I found useful are things like, we expect everyone in the team to identify opportunities for the team to become more effective. So it's a kind of a thing we do as a team is we always try and innovate, like a Kaizen approach, as they call it in Japan. Or it could be that everyone is expected to contribute to an inclusive environment in which everyone can express their thoughts and feelings. So in other words, by having these values, it means if someone is not living up to them, then everyone has the right and the duty almost to call them out on it, because it's a shared value of a group of people working together. The third one I quite like is also we expect fellow team members to support people when they're under time or emotional pressure. So like a human value. In other words, if someone is under real stress of some sort, then other team members are expected to help out if they can. So that's the kind of thing I mean by value. So again, a quick poll I think we'll do here, Paul. So this is asking, in the teams that you've been in at any time in your life, which of these 4 ingredients have been missing most often, in your opinion?
Excellent, Dan. So we've got the poll open. So we're just going to let everyone answer the question.
Brilliant, thank you.
It shouldn't be too long.
Paul, have we had any questions in yet or not?
We haven't had any questions in yet. So obviously just let everyone know, if you've got any questions throughout, just type them in. And obviously we do have around 10 to 15 minutes at the end where we'll have a Q&A section and we can put these forward to Dan. And obviously if we do have a lot of questions, don't worry, these will get passed on to Dan afterwards and we'll be able to get in touch directly with you. So we're about there. So I'll end the poll and I can share the results with you. So they should pop up on your screen now.
Okay. Oh, values, right. Yes. I'm not too surprised. So yeah, pretty even for goals. Paul, can everyone see these results, or is it just me?
Everyone should be able to see these results.
Okay, cool. Just to check. Yeah, so as you can see, values is the one that's most often missing. Interestingly, I found in my career, values was the biggest discriminator, and well, probably because it's most often missing, between really strong teams and really weak teams. And in fact, some of the best teams I've been either in or leading have been where, when the team was formed, it worked together to develop what the values are, because obviously values aren't easily imposed on people. They should come from the group of people themselves. And once those values are in place, then other people joining, it's sort of self-fulfilling, because you look for people who are going to fulfill those values. So it can, there's a video I can recommend if you ask me, if people get in touch later, of Apple in the early days, about how very strong their sense of values are and how they look for them in new recruits, for example. And actually, it comes through as quite a common ingredient of a lot of the most successful companies and brands as well, having a strong company value, usually led by the founder. Okay, cool. So that's the sort of team charter, if you like. And then there's the sort of team composition. This sunflower is to help me remember that good teams, strong teams, have between the team members people who are able and do contribute these different things towards the team. So it's not like a one-to-one. It's not like you have one person doing each of the things on this sunflower, and small teams, and people will fulfill multiple roles, but a strong team will have all of these in place somehow. And I think it starts with direction leading up to belief. So in other words, there needs to be someone who provides clear direction in what the team is trying to do and instills that sense of belief. Almost always, or most commonly, the leader of the team. It provides both of those, although sometimes there can be someone else who really helps on the side of, on the belief side. Maybe someone who's very passionate, who works very closely with the leader, who provides the passion and belief along with the direction from the leader. So that's the sort of first thing. And CEOs are often providing those things, for example, in a company. Then you need people who are going to provide practicality and rigor. So practicality means making sure things are feasible and viable, and rigor means that the analysis has been done well. So at a company level, you might have a chief operating officer for practicality, or a head of HR, and for rigor, the CFO often provides that rigor, of course, because money is a big part of that. But you also need people who come up with ideas, creative people who can help inject thinking that might unlock problems, help overcome problems, or provocation. People who, although people like that can be very annoying, they're essential to an effective team. And they're not annoying because they shouldn't have said that. They should be valued because provocation is an important part of providing checks and balances to make sure that decisions are right, and people aren't just doing what they did before, for example. And then in terms of harmony and clarity, a team will fall over if it doesn't have sufficient people contributing clarity about what's going on and why it's going on, and harmony, so everyone gets on and is functional. And again, in my experience, they can come from any role. It doesn't tend to align with a particular function, although it does tend to be stronger amongst certain of the personality preferences we saw before. So yeah, so if the use of this is when you're forming a team, especially larger teams, make sure you have a good mix of people who can fill these different roles within your team. And if one's missing, try and find someone to help strengthen the team. Cool. So meetings. Now, the reason I picked out this, even though it seems a very specific, almost tactical topic, is that I believe that it's something that is sorely needed in the business world. So this poll, don't put it up yet, Paul, but I just wanted to be a bit of context first, is I ran this on LinkedIn about a year ago. And I'm very curious to see if, and that was actually quite a small sample size. It closed after about 100 people. But I'm curious with this much, quite a lot larger sample size, or hopefully a bit larger. I can't remember how many we got before. Anyway, if we could do this vote, and I'll share with you the results and the results from before.
Excellent. So we've just made the poll go live. I've had a few questions come in just regarding the recording. They've joined a few a bit late. So just to let everyone know, today's session is being recorded, and obviously a week from today we will send you all an email which will give you an access link to obviously view the recording again. So don't worry, you will have access to the recording. And obviously we like to put forward as many questions to Dan in the Q&A section. So if you do have any questions, please get in touch and we'll be able to put them forward. There are around 85% who have answered, so we'll just give it a few more moments. Excellent. So I'll share the results with you now, Dan. So they should pop up on your screen.
So let's have a look. Yeah, it's broadly similar. So here, as you can see here, you've got, well, for a start, you've got 97 people saying yes, they have experienced that, and the balance within that is more people saying that yes, they've often been in a business meeting that was a complete waste of time. I thought I'd phrase that quite harshly, you know, that was a complete waste of time. And yet in this group, we've got more than half of people saying that, and that's the group on LinkedIn was even higher. It was, I think, 69% said yes, often, and they're basically people who follow me, and they sort of tend to be a bit older, people in their sort of 40s, 50s, 60s even. Yeah, and 95% across the top two boxes. So yeah, it's a huge deal. So that's why I'm going to show you just a couple of useful tips that I found really exceptionally useful. So the first one is in terms of to avoid meetings being a waste of time. It really pays to kind of insist, if you can, that everyone adopts a process like this when setting up a meeting, you know, and sending out the invitations effectively. And your nice acronym SPORT. Some of you may have crossed the POST framework, which is very similar. This is subtly different, but slightly superior, I think, I hope. So you've got S, subject. That just means, you know, what you call the meeting, what you put in the title when you send out the invitation, you know, the topic, succinctly. P, preparation. So the key thing here, I think, is being clear at the invitation stage what people will need to do beforehand. And this can be anything. It could just be, you know, collect your thoughts on topic X, or read through this material that's attached, etc. Or it could be, could X come prepare a summary of some such and such, and which they will be sharing in the meeting, that kind of thing. Then the third one is outcome. Now the O is the most important one by far, as in if people take the time to describe clearly what they want to be the outcome of the meeting itself, not the outcome of the whole project, but the outcome of this particular meeting, that is so helpful. In fact, it's helpful to the person arranging the meeting, because as soon as they think of like, this is the outcome we're going to aim to achieve, it automatically makes you think of who needs to be there, how long do you think it will take. It just helps you in your planning of the meeting. Roles, that's just so that everyone's clear what they'll be doing in the meeting, if they have a specific role, like to say something, share something, etc. So that it's another way of putting agenda, but it's much more clear. It's like such and such will be sharing this. And then of course, timing is how long each section is meant to last. So obviously R&T are classically more like a classic agenda, really. So if that happens every time, you've got a good chance that the meeting was worthwhile in the first place. And secondly, that it's been well thought through. But in the meeting itself, it's also important that it's run in an efficient, productive way. And this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-step process helps do that. So I use this as my default. Obviously, you can adapt it however you need, but it works well as a default. You start with the chair, and this is the key role of the chair, is just to remind people at the start of why the meeting is important, the context, and right at the start, a reminder of the outcomes that are needed by the end, because that helps everyone to be more focused. So it's the outcome, don't forget, that's what we're trying to achieve by the end of the meeting. Okay, number 2, you then have relevant information shared. Now, I'm pretty sure it's Jeff Bezos from Amazon who insists that everyone read silently for 15 minutes at the beginning of the meeting a pre-prepared document that outlines the issue that someone's prepared in advance. An alternative is for people to designated people to talk through the issue and provide the relevant information, context required for whatever the decision is. So that's number 2. Number 3 is important for inclusivity. So number 3 is asking each attendee in turn, usually with the chair coming last, almost always, to express their point of view on the issue, but without challenge. So people can ask points of clarification, but beyond that, no challenge, no debate yet. And that's important because that gives a good opportunity for people who are less confident about airing and sharing and interrupting others to be able to do it and put their thoughts across properly. And it's the chair's job to make sure that that's possible and no one undermines that. Then you can have a more broad debate around the topic now that everyone's shared their views. But again, the chair may need to make sure that everyone is contributing and has a chance to if they want to. Then, in an ideal situation, a consensus will be reached through the discussion. If a decision has to be made and there isn't a consensus, that again is the role of the chair to say, okay, we don't have full agreement here, but this is the decision and my reasons are blah, 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 blah. So for example, if 2 people debate two different options, say, and you can't get agreement because there's a difference in opinion about the relative importance of 2 factors, the chair might say, right, we're going to go with option B because in my opinion, that's the rationale, that's more likely to happen or whatever. And then finally, any meeting, however big or small, even if it's 2 people or hundreds of people, should always end with the actions, obviously. What are we going to do? Who's going to do it? By when? What, who, when? If all meetings have that at the end, that's a good meeting, if a meeting has that at the end. Okay, so I recommend this if you find this, you have challenges in whatever organization you're working with, this can help a lot. And networking. Now, I did have a bit of a debate here about what would be most useful to share in terms of building your network, but I thought I'd draw on my recent experience of the benefit of having a network. Having just recently gone to become a freelancer after 30 years in corporate life, and it's kind of really, I reflected on over the course of the career, you will build a group of people, you'll accumulate a group of people who are your advocates. People who really support you, like you, will recommend you, etc., etc., etc. And my guesstimate is you'll typically gain about 20 of those over 20 or 30 maximum, over 30 years, maybe 1 a year, I don't know. Quite a relatively small group for a long time. Then you'll have others who are allies. In other words, you've given a good impression, given a good impression to them. They like working with you. They've worked with you in the past. They'd be happy probably to work with you again, almost certainly. So they're allies. And again, you might amass sort of 100 or so of those over your career. And then beyond that, you'll have a lot of associates. You'll have potentially many thousands of associates, just people who will remember you. You work with or came across, and they'll remember you and hopefully you gave a good impression, but it's not a very strong relationship. And the important thing is to know who your advocates and your allies are and to keep in touch with them, to make sure you help them and they help you over the course of your career. So I did a list of all the assignments I've had since as a freelancer, and there were 18 different projects, effectively, different assignments, and 14 of them came from prior people I already knew, advocates and allies. So one was for a former boss, another was a former line report, a former client, a former business partner, and several from former colleagues. So, you can see how important it is to build your network of people who might be able to help you, and especially in the modern world where people are much more likely to be working freelance and moving around more than perhaps they were 20 years ago. And how to do that? Well, I actually think it's quite straightforward. It's all about just being a decent, conscientious human being. There's no other tips or tricks to be shared, I don't think. If you want to earn trust, then listen to people and be courteous. Listening skills are fundamental to building trust. Always be open and honest. Ideally know what you're talking about. Don't pretend to know stuff that you don't know about. Always keep your word. And if you do make a mistake, put your hand up. I mean, if you do those things, you will build trust. You will still make as many mistakes as other people, but that people will trust you. And obviously at the bottom here, it's effectively just the negatives, the converse of the factors above. So that's my sort of words of wisdom, so to speak. And the final section here is about telling business stories. So obviously storytelling is an important and growing skill in business. So I'm just going to, I think this is the final poll, Paul, about which film out of those 4 you like the most.
Excellent. So we've got the final poll up and ready for everyone to answer, and we've got some answers coming in. So just before we move to the poll the results, I've had a question which has come in off the back of obviously discussing the framework. So they're asking, is the meeting framework different for virtual meetings or meetings where some are in the room and some are on the phone? I don't know if maybe if you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
I'm more thinking, I don't think they are in this case. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I drafted this whole book before COVID hit, and then I actually did a complete rewrite because of the rapid increase in virtual working. No, I think the broad framework makes sense. Yeah, I mean, obviously how you share information might be done differently. There might be better or worse ways of doing the information sharing bit. But I think the principle of going around and asking people in turn, for example, is universal. And obviously the sort of the sport preparation acronym, again, all of those things apply equally to both. So I think the way you do the interaction is different, but the principles that those particular frameworks I don't think are affected. I will have a proper think about that afterwards in case I've missed anything and feed it back. But yeah, I think so.
Excellent. So we've got the results. So I'll just share them with you now.
Oh, pretty even. That's interesting. Just for my own personal interest, I guess that Star Wars would be top and then Lord of the Rings, but it's actually the other way around slightly. Pretty even. Oh, but nice. Most of you liked at least one of those films. Okay, curious. There wasn't a lot of point to this apart from to introduce the topic, which is that all 4 of those movies there are based around a similar story structure. And in fact, it's something like 60% of all kind of major movie releases, not sort of indie ones necessarily, but major movie releases, but big blockbustery things, follow this same structure called you may have come across, called the hero's journey. So, okay, often there's always in the hero's journey, there's a scene setting. And scene setting means when life is good, life is fine. The hobbits are having a lovely party. Luke Skywalker, he's on the farm. Things are fine, things are nice. Then you have the challenge. The challenge is presented suddenly out of nowhere often, like Lord Voldemort is on his return, he's coming back. And obviously people are very worried about that. And then with Lord Voldemort, you've got Harry Potter, who's going to need to be part of defeating Lord Voldemort. And he's scared by this prospect. So there's a lot of tension here. But then you need to offer hope. So in this case, you often have what's the figure called? The role, the master, the person the advisor, Dumbledore, who will say to Harry, you can do it. Don't worry, I'm here to offer support and guidance. Then the meat of the story, the bit that takes the most time anyway, is a series of challenges or quests, learning journey, where you often have a new challenge and you overcome it. And during this journey, the hero tends to develop and get stronger, learn new skills or develop in some emotional way as well, potentially, until they're finally capable of defeating the challenge, of overcoming the challenge. And then, of course, you have a bit at the end, which is the happy ending. So that's the framework. Now, the reason I'm talking all about movies and storylines is because this particular structure lends itself very well to business meetings and in fact even pitches as well, new business pitches. So I'll just show you how that works. So a classic default for a business storyline is you start with the context. You're talking, and in fact here it's quite important to make the audience feel proud of what the brand or the company or the organization has achieved to this date so far, to be proud. Here's the context, here's if you like, here's what we've got to lose, okay? Then you present the challenge. Say, unfortunately, we're in the spirits market and everyone's now drinking loads of water and everything's in decline, whatever, the challenge. And even if it's an opportunity, it's important to create attention here. Create tension here. In other words, here's an opportunity we really mustn't miss out on, or if we don't seize it, a competitor will. There has to be tension. Okay, that's the challenge. Then the third one is the hope, offering hope. Say, but don't worry, thanks to this fantastic presentation you're about to see, we will shed light on the challenge and we'll know exactly what to do. And then you do it. Then typically you structure it into 3 parts, 3 acts, I suppose. Anyway, 3 sections, each around a particular message. And in each message, you give your kind of your point of view about the message, the points that argue for that point of view, the support, the data, plus ideally something to make it memorable. And then you might want to discuss the implications before you get on to sections B and then section C. And by the time you've built through A, B, and C, hopefully the implications should be clear and it can be a happy ending. This works brilliant for all sorts of different types of business meeting, like I said. So if you're ever stuck thinking, well, how am I going to structure this? Maybe this will help. Right, so that's, we're all good timing. We're just come to the conclusion of the snippets. So I've shown you 6 out of the 50 different topics covered in the soft skills, the best-selling soft skills book. Also available, like I said at the beginning, the Smart Marketing book for anyone who's interested in marketing as well. So there's the adverts. If you want to follow up, get in touch, see some of my other things, or feel free to follow me. I'm Dan White 1000, or Dan White Author of the Smart Marketing book, as I've shown here. And I've also got a website. Now this has got a lot, it's based around all my frameworks and drawings. It hasn't got all the soft skills stuff on it, but it has a lot around marketing and business and marketing. So for example, here is just a snippet of some of the visuals and frameworks that I include in that section. And within each one, I also explain the framework and when you might use it and give you handy links to sort of further reading if you require it. Okay, so that's me. So we now can open to questions, either ones that have come up, Paul, or anyone that people want to ask live, right?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Excellent presentation, really insightful, and great to obviously have you today to present. So obviously, just before we move to questions, just to remind everyone, if you do have a question, please type them in, and obviously I'll be able to put forward these questions to Dan. We've had some questions obviously come around the recording, just to remind everyone that the recording will be sent a week from today. So just look out for the email, it'll have the link, and obviously you'll be able to view the presentation from Dan in that recording. So obviously we'll move into some of the questions which have come in. So obviously a few of the questions which have come up. So one thing which might be a good way to kick it off would be, whose role is it to ensure that the workforce is equipped with the right skills for the future? Is it up to the individual, the educational institution, governments, or organisations themselves? What would you suggest is the best approach?
I think, as a kind of general rule of thumb, that it's up to the organisation to specify what needs to be learned, if you like. So to say, to be successful in this job, a bit like you would in a job, job description, actually, for when you're joining, but to say, you need to have built these certain skills to qualify, or to get promoted or whatever, or to become good in this area. So they specify that. And I think it's also up to the organization to provide access to the learning materials, opportunity. That's why a lot of companies subscribe to things like LinkedIn Learning, because for many topics, that's a rich resource that people can draw on if they need to fill in gaps in their knowledge. But I think in terms of the input, the responsibility for the actual development and making sure you find time and dedication towards it, but I think that has to come from the individual. And I think good organizations allow the individual to take responsibility to identify where they personally have gaps, and where they don't as well. And therefore, so that they can decide where to prioritize to build, rather than sort of compulsory courses all the time that are quite dull for some people and too sophisticated for others, etc. That's yeah. Does that? I think that answers. Hopefully, that answers the topic, the question.
Excellent, thank you. So we've got obviously starting the Q&A. We've got a lot of people typing in questions, so I'll move over to those. So we've had a question come in. How would you go about convincing your team members that the 4 elements, values, goals, rules, and roles are effective teams, necessary and beneficial? How would you sort of implement that into obviously convincing team members that right approach?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think of the strongest kind of proof and evidence that it's valuable. I've certainly got quite a few actual case studies about companies where, companies which are ultimately just big teams, aren't they? Where having clear values and objectives is beneficial, more likely to lead to success. I'm not sure how rigorously this has been proven, but I'm pretty sure there is data out there. I did the research like 3 years ago, and I'm trying to remember all the things I drew on to formulate some of those things. That's definitely, I'll get back to you. But yeah, I think actually I think just the act of engaging with your team members and asking them questions. And what I would probably do is say, as a leader, I believe it will be helpful to us. I believe it will be helpful for us to establish rules and values and so. What do you think? What do you think it would bring? What reservations do you have, etc.? If you can do that with key team members, or all team members, depending on the size of your team, or delegate some of that even just the act of doing that is probably going to help move your team forward a little bit, and you'll learn things that will help you do that. Hope that helps.
Excellent, thank you. So a quick question off the back of that question, which has come in. So a little bit controversial, but how do you deal with troublemakers? Yeah,
well, I've got an actual chat. Well, if you've got clear rules that people are aware of and were aware of when they joined or whatever, and the values are clear and expressed and reinforced, then if you've got a troublemaker, then it makes it actually easier to talk to the troublemaker and say, look, as you know, we have these rules and these values, and you can talk about your belief that they're not upholding those values. Obviously, give the opportunity to counter that, but it gives you that opportunity to have that conversation at least, and to say, well, this is important to the team. You'll need to start to address this. Now, actually, within the book, I do have two very useful frameworks. One which is called handling conflict. So specifically, if you have that's more of a moment in time conflict. But there's also one which is about how to have important conversations. And there's a framework. I mean, if we had a bit more time, I could flick to it, but I don't think we've really got the time to do that. Which there's a particular framework for handling those kind of difficult conversations. If I could be quicker, I could find the page and I could talk you through it. Just give me 2 seconds, actually. Now, let's move on. I don't want to waste people's time. If I find it over the next 100 minutes, I'll get back to it, I promise.
Okay, yeah. Excellent. So we'll move to another question. So it's a bit more around, obviously, future and obviously soft skills and sort of leaders of the future and role. So they're asking, as jobs become more automated and intertwined with technology, how important will social and emotional intelligence skills be?
Well, I think there's a shift. There has been a shift, and there's a continuing shift, isn't there? Because the more certain technical capabilities are becoming automated, right? They just are, and actually, what's left is the the more emotional things, the things that can't yet, at least, be done through algorithms or machine learning, etc. So I think social and persuasion skills, communication skills, interpersonal skills will continue to become, they will just always become more and more important. And they have become more important already. I think that will continue. By the way, I have come up with the framework. Oh no, sorry, apologies, carry on. Next question, please.
No problem. So it's around, obviously, business education. So how do you think business education will have to change in order to create leaders that have suitable skills to succeed in their careers? There's obviously sort of looking at how sort of they can better leaders of the future.
Yeah, I think a lot of organisations need to rethink how they structure their learning programmes. I've been involved in helping a couple of companies to do that. It needs to be thinking about that there's a kind of a semi-chronological flow of things that people need to learn. And I've kind of tried to reflect those in the flow of the chapters in the book, which is, you know, for example, when people come into the workforce these days, it's quite common for them to find it hard to settle, to settle down and to get used to working in an efficient way. So actually the focus early on is tips and tricks like how to handle your time better. Time management is something I think needs to come on, be helped, supported very early on in people's careers. And then you quickly move on to things like we talked about before about handling up different personalities, understanding your own and other people, and how to work with different types of people. Then you've got the more sort of managerial skills, and then finally got those sort of much higher level leadership skills. So and with that comes things like the ability to communicate really clearly and persuasively and convincingly, and also those abilities to gain trust and belief, etc. All of these things are trainable. That's the thing. Everyone can learn how to get better in any of these areas. They're completely accessible, so long as you have you're conscious that those things are as important, if not more important, as technical skills. I've noticed that actually the people who are senior in businesses I've been involved in tend to be not necessarily highly technical. They tend to be a little bit more generalist and extremely strong at soft skills. A roundabout answer.
Excellent, fantastic. So we've had a question come in. I think it might need a little bit more elaboration to it, but they're asking, would values in teams be the same as team norms? So I think they mean like sort of, are they too different or are they dressed as the same? How would you sort of approach those?
I think they sound similar. I mean, it'd be nice to hear from the person if they want to, just explain what they mean by norms. I mean, I think team norms to me means it's effectively the same as values, really. As in norms, we expect people to be like this, because it's only the behaviors that matter, let's be honest, effectively. You can't control what people think in their head, but you can control how they, you can expect certain behaviors and disapprove of others or find certain behaviors unacceptable. And I think norms and values are practically the same for this purpose. But if the person wants to, follow up, then please do.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, the person who typed that in, please, if you've got any more information, please provide that. It'd be great, and obviously we can get Dan to elaborate a little bit more. And obviously, anyone who's got any further questions, please feel free to type them in. So Dan, I'm going to put forward a question to you. This is from me. So I was reading recently a report from the Institution for the Future, and they were suggesting that 85% of the jobs, 85% of jobs, what will exist in 2030 haven't been invented yet. So how would you say that we need to prepare for these jobs, or that we don't even know what's going to exist? Do you think it's sort of, is there any skills out there now which will help us?
Well, my guess is that the jobs that will exist in 2030 will require soft skills, and they probably won't require technical skills. And even if they do require technical skills, we won't, because we don't know what those technical skills are yet. Like I said at the beginning, soft skills tend to be more transferable. The ability to articulate ideas, the ability to get different people and parties to collaborate together towards something, coordination and if business still involves people in 2030, then how you inspire them and resolve conflicts and all these other things and delegate to them, etc., is all going to be absolutely vital. So again, I think it just points more towards the fact that soft skills are increasingly important.
Excellent, fantastic. We seem to have finished all the questions. We seem to be approaching the end. Maybe just a quick one to obviously finish. Obviously, the last two so years have been, we've had the pandemic, and obviously it's been a big switch from working in an office to everything going online. How is your sort of approach, and obviously writing the book previously to then obviously having everything change? What have you sort of learned from obviously the pandemic, and what have you seen from people? Have they improved their soft skills and obviously more learning, or do you think it's sort of had not a great effect to everyone?
I think I suspect it's had a slight, obviously people have got better and more confident and more skilled at working virtually and interacting virtually. Yeah, of course, we all have, because we do it so much. I do think it means there's probably a bit of a divergence in terms of people who are naturally a little bit less confident interpersonally have been able to avoid, to sort of lean back a lot. Whereas obviously when most interaction was face-to-face, then they would naturally have built those skills more because they'd be having to be more involved in live things. And also you do have a lot of people who haven't actually even, they've entered the workforce in the last few years and they have hardly ever been into the office yet. So there will be a lag in terms of learning how to deal with things face to face. And there are differences. Body language is less important because you can't really see it as clearly, and certain aspects of body language are invisible, here. Whereas you have another thing to learn there, which does take some time actually, and there are lots of things that are worth knowing. So I think the fundamental, I didn't have to actually interested in that. The principles in the soft skills book didn't change with the rewrite. It was more some of the tips and tricks. I had to put in more tips and tricks that are unique to the virtual world. That's all. I think the principles and frameworks are there, but the actual skills, which actually it's more about practice. So when we all return to offices, which is really starting to happen now quite quickly in a lot of places I've noticed, then yeah, some people will probably have to, or we'll all have to relearn at least. Quite fascinating. For example, you probably can't tell here, but I'm only about 5'5". I really am quite short. And but for the last few years, I could be 6 foot potentially. But anyway, there are some, but I'm proud of my height, by the way. Don't worry about it. I haven't got a thing about it. So,
excellent, fantastic.
Anyway, on that bombshell.
Yeah, excellent. So lastly, Dan, thank you for a great session. It's been really insightful, and obviously
you're welcome.
A lot of people have been thanking, and obviously really appreciate the great presentation. And obviously just to remind everyone, the session has been recorded, so don't worry, we'll send this along a week from today, so you'll all receive an email with the link. Just before we do go, just to let you know that we have got lots of webinars taking place between now and obviously the end of the year. So our next one is taking place on the 26th of April at 12 p.m. and that's with Simone Fenton-Jarvis, and she's going to be presenting on the human-centric workplace, enabling people, communities, and our planet to thrive. So if you'd like to attend that webinar or look at the schedule and see what webinars we have in place until the end of the year, so please head over to www.associationofmpas.com and you'll be able to register and obviously view the schedule we currently have in place. So all that's left to say is thank you, Dan. Thank you for taking the time. It's been great to have you present, and we look forward to seeing everyone at a webinar shortly.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.